I found in my own practice that I'm mothering my mind all the time, in a way. And the idea that my mother used to say, watch out, pay attention, listen to me, look at what you're doing, were all moments where she's calling up mindfulness in the child. And that's actually, we've had it since the beginning. It's not a new thing. We're here today in this body, healthy still with all our parts, because somewhere along the way, mindfulness came into the picture and said, okay, don't step out in the street. Okay, be careful. Pay attention. You're here in your body. And so it has a protective quality. There's a famous teaching which I believe Ajahn Sumedho gave called Mindfulness is the Path to the Deathless, wasn't it? A title of the book. I always liked that title. The mindful never die. Even though unmindful one is if one is unmindful, he's as if, even though living, he is as if dead, okay? And that's actually a translation of a different word, apamada, abamat in Thai pronunciation, abamat. So sorry about that. Again, the Thais love Pali. It's mixed into the language. And so the mothers say, ya bamat na, log na, ya bamat. Don't be careless. Bamat is the opposite of abamat. Don't be careless. Pay attention. Ya bamat, don't be careless. Careless is also translated as scornful or heedless. It's a certain negative quality of the mind. It's not just, I'm not paying attention. It's like, I don't care that I'm not paying attention. It's that 16-year-old rebellious mind that says, I'm not listening to you. I'm going to do what I want to do. And so it's actually counter to the mindfulness, the abamat, or be careful, pay attention, listen to me, be heedful, watch out for what you're doing. Don't let the bad people in the house. Don't let the bad objects in your sense doors. They're actually opposites. And so here, Ajahn Sumedho's reminding us that mindfulness leads us not only to nirvana, but it protects us. It protects our body and our lives and our mind. It keeps us here, protected. Unmindfulness or carelessness, even if we're alive and we're having a great time, if we're living in a careless way, it's like we're dead already, because we're not really awake to the reality of our life. And so if we understand how mindfulness works and what kind of mind state it is and what it does, then we can understand what the word sama sati, or perfect mindfulness. I will translate that sama as perfect, as in the Samma Sampotiyang, the perfectly self-enlightened Buddha. By perfect mindfulness, again in the Abhidhamma, when I looked up Samma Sati, they said there's no such thing as Samma Sati, because all Sati is Samma Sati. So there's no such thing as Miccha Sati, is what they mean. Every Sati is perfect mindfulness, because mindfulness is a beautiful Cetasika. However, when we talk about correct path and incorrect path, we need to use it as a reference point. And so we could say, yes, there is Sammasati. It's in the Noble Eightfold Path. It's called Sammasati, or perfect mindfulness, correct mindfulness. But in a Miccha Mak, or in an incorrect path, Sati couldn't exist in that world, because it doesn't go there. Does concentration go there or not? I don't know. Nowadays we see kids with these games. And we've actually had some students over the years who spent so many hours, man hours, human hours, playing with video games, that when they come to meditate, there's problems in the practice which arise that didn't arise 10 years ago with young people. And so I have some concern about the attention, intention, the functions of what are called vittok vichan, or vittaka vichara, the concentration of the mind on the object and the absorption of the mind into what might be unwholesome objects. And so we need to remind our children not to spend too much time playing video games. We had to send one young man to a mental hospital, and I don't know if it was because of his video games or just other things that were happening. Mindfulness, in order to become perfect mindfulness, we need to apply on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. If we study what is called the Noble Eightfold Path, you have correct view, correct thought, correct speech, correct action, correct livelihood, correct effort, correct mindfulness, and correct concentration. Correct or perfect mindfulness is always defined as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And so the foundations are mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of mind objects. Mindfulness of the body, we have all of the movements and positions of the body. And so you're feeling, right now, mindfulness of feeling when we start moving around here. We'll go through mindfulness of body quickly so we can get to the feeling. It means the 4 major positions of standing, walking, sitting, lying down. We can use a mental noting method to actively recollect and contemplate what we're doing, like mentally note standing, standing, standing. Or when you're walking, right, left, or if you're doing walking meditation, right goes thus, left goes thus, while you're walking. Or if you're jogging, right, left, or bicycling, you could also try that. Sitting, we can mentally note the sitting posture as sitting, or we can contemplate that part of the body which moves, the rising and the falling of the abdomen when we're breathing. Or if we're doing Anapanasati style breath, you could contemplate breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. I was trained with the rising and falling, which was to observe the natural movements, just like you're sitting on the beach watching the waves coming in and going out. And you can bring your mind to observe that, noting it as it occurs. Rising, falling, rising, falling. You can do that also when you're lying down. You become aware of the earth element as you're lying down and noting rising, falling, or lying, lying, lying. Mindfulness of the body also means all the minor positions, such as lifting, like lifting or lowering, raising, touching, moving, bending, stretching, all of the small things that we do with our body. For example, taking a glass of water, one during their meditation course is advised to mentally note or acknowledge each movement from the very beginning, beginning with the intention, like intending, 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 reaching, 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 touching, 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 grasping, 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 holding, 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 or lifting, 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 moving, 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 touching, 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 then drinking, swallowing, etc. In which case I'll have to stop talking. And those would be the main objects. When we practice in the center in Thailand or do the courses here or with the offer who's teaching, we have 3 physical exercises that we do. A mindful prostration, which is a 5-point prostration in isolated motion, as well as standing and walking meditation, as well as sitting meditation. And the movements and positions of the body are gradually increased to become more detailed. That is mindfulness of the body. Of course, as we're sitting, we will notice feeling, as if you have been experiencing some numbness or stiffness or aching in different parts, and especially if we're aging, and even sometimes when we're not. There are 3 main kinds of feeling. We have pleasant physical feeling, happy mental feeling, which fall into the sukha somana, or the pleasant and happy side of feeling. We have the unpleasant physical feeling, or unpleasant emotional feeling, and painful physical feeling, or suffering mental feeling, tukha tomanasa feelings, which are unpleasant or painful. And then we have neutral feeling, or equanimous feeling, indifferent feeling. And so if it's a painful feeling, we were trained to mindfully contemplate it or note it. Pain, 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 pain. If it becomes unbearable, then you're noting unbearable, unbearable, unbearable. If you wanted to move, then you would slowly, like stretching, 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 or intending to move and then stretching, stretching, stretching. Other instructions were to remind yourself that very few people actually die during sitting meditation. And so we should persevere. Pain, pain, pain. No, very few people actually die during sitting meditation, and those who do are number 1. So we should persevere with the pain, 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 pain. That's the lion-hearted version of it. And so feelings are regarded as being either heart-based, like emotional feelings, or sensual, like a physical, sensual-based. It doesn't matter whether it's a happy or a suffering or neutral. We can become mindful of them. I've practiced many years with physical, painful feeling, and I found that it does go away after some time. And sometimes if it doesn't, you just mindfully move and be aware of that you're curing it temporarily. It might appear in some other place. Mindfulness of the mind is the 3rd foundation, and that was defined as being the contemplation of all kinds of mind, states or consciousness states, wholesome and unwholesome. It doesn't matter what kind of thoughts. For a beginning student, it's the wandering thoughts. And so the instructions were to note it as thinking, 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 giving it a generic label. Whenever the thought appears, thinking, 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 or knowing, knowing, knowing. It doesn't matter if they're good thoughts, bad thoughts, past, future, or present, we're noting them. As regards states of mind or consciousness states in the Pali canon, they were defined as being mind with desire, mind without desire, mind with anger, mind without anger, mind with delusion, mind without delusion, or lopang chitang, alopang chitang, tosang chitang, atosang chitang, etc. like that. So different mind states which have their emotional component, it appears. Contracted, distracted, developed, undeveloped, surpassed, unsurpassed, concentrated, unconcentrated, liberated, unliberated. And this is according to the recitation catalog, or the Pali scripture, which was handed down verbally for so many years. Mindfulness of the mind objects, or Dhammanupassana Satipatthana. The word Dhamma, again, is spelled like the word Dharma in Pali. And the Thais pronounce it Dhamma, Dhammanupassana. They contract the vowels a little bit and make hard sounds. And part of that so that they're using beautiful upper class, in the alphabet they have high class letters and low class letters. And so you don't want to use a low class letter in a high class word. A high class word is the Dharma. It's something that should be in a high place. And so they just subtly changed the pronunciation to fit. So Buddha becomes Putto, or Praputta Jau. It's a beautiful letter that's used. They use, anyway, it's very complicated. Once you understand the system, it's very easy to understand, though. And so it just takes a little ear tuning. Dhammanupassana Satipatthana, or Dhammanupassana, is mindfulness of mind objects or dharmas as mind objects or dharmas to realize the Dharma with a capital D. This was the translation as given by Bhikkhu Bodhi, I believe. We call it mind objects. What is a mind object? It's something that's occupying the mental space and driving it around, often driving it crazy. Or something like that. At least in the case of the 5 hindrances, we have different groups of mind objects. The first was called the 5 aggregates, which we may or may not have studied about. You have the physical aggregate, or rupa. You have the feeling aggregate, or vedana. You have the memory or perception aggregate, sanya. You have the mental formation aggregate, or volition. It's also called sankhara. And you have the consciousness aggregate, or vinyanang. And so when one is mindfully noting rising and falling of the abdomen, so even if you're just noting rising and falling, you're automatically contemplating these 5 aggregates. You don't have to think which one is the rupa, which one's the vedana, which is the khandha, or which khandha is it. Just noting rising and falling is contemplating 5 aggregates. The action and the physical characteristics of the rising of the abdomen is the physical aggregate. The mind which knows is the mental aggregate. And so automatically they're in there. It's like one package together. Another group of mind objects are called the 5 hindrances of sensual desire, anger, sloth and torpor, worry, restlessness, and doubt. And these also need to be contemplated when they arise. For example, craving, 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 or desire, 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 angry, 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 sleepy, 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 anxious, 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 or worry, 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 however that appears to you, or doubting, doubting, doubting. Another group of mind objects are called the 6 sense bases, or the physical eye, the visible object, and the seeing. The ear, the sound and hearing, the nose, the scent and smelling, the tongue, the taste, tasting, the body, the contact and the sensation, the mind, Google, no, and thinking, the mind object, and thinking. And so we have these objects arising. We note them when they do arise. Seeing, 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 hearing, 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 smelling, 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 tasting, 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 touching or contacting, feeling, 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 and thinking, thinking, thinking. Those are in not so brief the 5 different groups of mind objects, the 6 sense spaces. And so from here we could go into the 5 faculties, or if it's too late we can break and continue this next year. or later. I have a little bit I was going to talk about balancing faculties so that mindfulness stays in tune, but I don't know how you like to go, or I could just do the conclusion. Yes, we could do some questions, and I would be happy to answer a few questions since it's coming to the end of your hour and a half. I just wanted to point out that Ajahn Tong has commented, so in conclusion, Ajahn Tong has commented that life without meditation is empty and useless, like a dried up fallow field or a barren field. It's like an empty rice bowl. We should all strive to bring the benefit of mental development into our lives and families. And nowadays we need to find the way to freedom from the confusion of worldly distractions. If we can access our inner wisdom, we will find the outer solution to problems which arise. A good person always strives to improve and correct themselves. A common worldly person will get angry and blame others for their problems. A good yogi acknowledges and corrects, remembering that the mind is the chief and all good things begin in the cultivation of the mind. We have many books of knowledge and wisdom on the shelf. If we don't open them and read them, they cannot give us their benefit. Each of us have inner wisdom inside ourselves. If we don't learn how to access our hearts and minds, this priceless wisdom is useless. When we practice and study and master ourselves, we can share the benefit of our wisdom with each other. And so coming together in a group, together like this, when you study and practice together, it's really the most wonderful thing that you can all do, not only for yourselves and your families and each other, but for the whole sphere that you're in. And so I appreciate very much your good work in the Dharma. And with that, then we can open some questions. So.
Concerning the practice.
Or non-questions? Comments?
I'll start.
Okay.
Sometimes questions comes up, do we need to use all the 4 foundations, or can we just go all the way through with one of them, or 2 of them? What do you think? When you sit on the cushion, what do you do with all this knowledge?
Well, I try to forget about it and see that which is discernible. And so I think in the sutta, wasn't the Buddha pointing out to contemplate that which is discernible? Somewhere I saw that. And Ajahn Tong will talk about it, any one of them. Or you can hop from one to the other. So which one is discernible? There might be some period where the body is a very discernible object, or maybe feeling. I spent years with the particular feeling, and every time sitting it was like the same. And of course it changes from moment to moment. And then the mind comes in. And then the mind is driven by its objects. When I learned how to do this, we started mostly with the body, but then of course feeling comes in. So it does hop from one to the other. Could you isolate one? We're going, not deliberately, but what comes into the sphere of awareness or field of awareness, that was what we were trained to note. And so it became present moment object, because it seems to me that the mind, it does move from object to object. To hold it still on only the body, it's possible to do that for some period of time, but then it moves. It's not going to stay. My mind won't stay there. Or sometimes the body itself seems to fall away, and then the mind, I'm only aware of the mind, or maybe the feeling, or maybe the mind object. So from what I've heard Ajahn Tong speak, and from my experience with the training, it was always which one comes first, which one's happening now, which one is more gross or discernible or perceptible to you. And that of the objects, we could call the body the main object, but it isn't always the main object. Because sometimes the main object means that which you experience right now. It could be any one of them, the body or the feelings or the mind mind object. If one was contemplating breath, only rising and falling, and there was no other objects, then you could be with a single object. They do a process of rising and falling, and sometimes sitting and touching the points, and there might not be another object that appears for some time in the body, but still it's like moving from one rising to one falling.
The chart just shows the options? Because it says there is one way.
Yes, there's one way, and the one way is based on these 4 foundations, and that it was considered one way because it leads in, it was founded by the one person, the Buddha. It leads in one direction, which means nirvana. It has to be traveled by oneself. There's only one destination, which is nirvana. And so the meaning of one way is that the 4 foundations would actually encapsulate, from what Ajahn Tong said, encapsulate all of the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha. And so you might come to that one way from different places. So whether it was through the body or the feelings or the mind object, because again, if you look at body and its elemental quality, or body as its movement quality. So if we go to the classic of the Gaya Nupassana Satipatthana, the section on the foundation of the body, that's